Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another episode of an Involved Review. We actually have a really special one for you here today, but before I get ahead of myself, I'm your host, James Caleb Kitchens, and I'm joined each and every week here from the Stovall Wrestling Network. Caleb Stovall, what's going on, man?
What's going on, man? How's it going?
It is a going. We are still in quarantine land, but it looks like it
Yeah,
might let up at some point in the future. Uh,
yeah, looks like it's starting to. Thank God.
Yeah, man, and it's been good, and we've been able to cover a lot of Dark Side of the Ring in that time. So tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about what might be in the future for Dark Side of the Ring. We're not done covering season 1 and 2 episodes, so that's still going. We did say on the previous broadcast that we're not going to cover all of them. If we don't think that there's anything for us to really do an episode about or talk about, then we won't cover the episode. We're not going to waste your time or ours. But today we have something really special. We're going to talk about predictions for what might be on Dark Side of the Ring season 3. So
Yeah, we heard that they finally got picked up for another season and stuff like that because Vice was very impressed by the numbers and the viewers that they got for season 2, which I don't think that Vice going into it thought that this would become as big as it did, kind of
right,
thing.
it's become the most watched program, and really to the point that Vice has started investing more into this, and they're going to look to sort of do sort of kind of like spin-offs of this. I don't know exactly how that's going to manifest, but we'll see what they come up with. I'm definitely excited to see what they come up with.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Like I said, I've been a fan of the show and the way that they do things. Like I love how you have, the actual footage, and then you have like the reenactment footage of it and stuff like that. Especially during, we covered the New Jack episode last week, and the scene at the end with the guy with the cocaine all over his face. That
Yeah,
one was great.
best ending to I mean, it's between that and Herb Abrams, and they both involve cocaine somehow. Uh, but so before we dig into it, so we got together earlier this week, and we ironed out the 10 that we want to talk about. These aren't going to be in any particular order because there's one towards the end that I think is a definite. So they're not in any particular order, but there's a couple things that we're going to talk about in relation to each one, such as how famous is the person, how likely is it to draw like mass appeal to the episode? People want to know more about them. Can the right people speak on it? And this means are they alive? Do they work for WWE? Because history has told us, even though they've never come out with an official policy on this, history has told us if you're currently employed by WWE, then that's a no go for Dark Side of the Ring, most likely. Um, is there enough material for them to do a full episode about this person? Is there more information to uncover? Are there things behind the scenes that haven't been explored or that we don't know about? And just kind of how likely is it that Vice would do an episode about this particular person or topic? So that's how we looked at these. Once again, they're not in any particular order. And then at the end, we're going to kind of speculate on some stuff that they may or may not do, or just kind of honorable mentions. Um, Before we get into the list, though, this is something that just popped into my head during the pre-show. Uh, what who do you think that they'll get to narrate it? Because we've seen Dutch Mantel in season 1. We've seen one episode narrated by Mick Foley, which was the really special Bruiser Brody episode, and then Chris Jericho narrated season 2. So, what are your thoughts on a narrator for season 3?
Well, if I was a betting man, I would say the safe bet would be that they will probably go with Jericho for a lot of them again. But I could definitely see Mick Foley making an appearance to do another one. I thought about this one. How about this one for a narrator? Arn Anderson.
Oh, that would be good. Yeah, I
Hmm.
thought about him. I thought about Jake. And we're going to talk about Jake a little bit more later. Spoilers: he's not on the main list, but we are going to talk about him. He's
He's
a great
pretty easy.
talker. He's an amazing talker, and he's got a great story. So he would be one. hell, if they could swing it, Jonathan Coachman would be a great narrator. But I think he has a
Yeah,
deal with
he would.
WWE right now. I'm not sure. Want to say they have some sort of thing going, but if not, then I think Coachman would be an amazing narrator.
He was recently released by WWE so they could use this guy as one of them, and that would be Nigel McGuinness.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He's
I didn't
got
even
a
think
great
about that.
he's got a great speaking voice. In fact, if they wanted to, they could probably get Nick Aldis to do some.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Hopefully, he never sees this. But Nick Aldis bores me to death in the ring. But you know, that's neither here nor there. I just thought I'd mention that. Hopefully, he doesn't. Hopefully, he doesn't watch this show. Um, so yeah, man, let's get into it. So, number one on the list. This is somebody that we both agreed should be very high on the list, and that is Joni Laurer or China. This is probably, I think, out of the people on this list, this is definitely the most famous one, just because of her multiple championship reigns. She was the Intercontinental Champion. Her on-screen, kind of feud and relationship with Eddie Guerrero. Um, just her prominent role in the Attitude Era in general. Being in DX, all of the tragedy with her and Stephanie and Triple H in this sort of violent love triangle that she got the worst end of, and then
Mhm.
her tragic and untimely death, unfortunately, I think makes her, uh, unfortunately, and I'm going to say that a lot tonight, unfortunately makes her a target she's prime material for a Dark Side of the Ring episode.
Yeah, in fact, I'm pretty sure that the producers themselves, they've already started discussing and throwing out some ideas as well, and that's been like number one almost with them is to do an episode on her. So that one I can definitely see, not just her, stuff with Triple H and Stephanie, but also remember X Pac, Sean Waltman was involved in that as well, that they had a relationship. In fact, I think him getting with her was one of the things that like drove a wedge between him and Triple H for a little bit.
Agreed. And then you've got a lot there that, I mean, they could probably get him to come on and speak. I think
Mhm,
as far as being able to get the right people, there's a lot of people like they could get Billy Gunn. I mean, he was close to that situation.
mhm.
Um, so I mean, they could get a lot of people that were close to her and close to that situation to come on and speak about it. Um, I think Jim Ross probably has some interesting notes or comments on
Oh,
it,
I'm sure he
since
does.
I mean he was head of talent relations, so he had some level of a relationship with everybody, and that was talent wise at the time. Um,
Right.
and I mean, they've got to mention the One Night in China tape. I mean, that has to come up.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, that's definitely going to come up. And here's the thing. She's a big prime candidate for it because her involvement in wrestling cannot be overlooked.
Right.
Like if you think about it today, there would not even be a talk of a women's revolution in wrestling had it not been for China. I mean, her character, the way that she presented herself, it was so different from any other female athlete that had been, done before. And she would, especially like the way that she came in, kind of thing with Triple H, being a bodyguard. And, I love Shawn Michaels when, discussing that with McMahon. He's like, that doesn't make any sense. He's protected by a woman. And they're like, that's the point. He's protected by a woman. And he's like, oh, I get it now. you know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I
she
mean,
would
like
she would be,
a Charlotte Flair or a Shayna Baszler would definitely not exist without
you
China's
know,
influence.
or would not at least have the attitude of
Right.
women and stuff like that. She and we've even heard Jim Cornette and several others talk about her, and they said that, like, well, the wrestling business, pretty much killed Joni Lawler. So so there's a lot of stuff to uncover with that. So yeah, I think she would be, top candidate for an episode.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, there was a lot. It really makes me sick seeing Stephanie McMahon out there like taking credit for like everything that happens in women's wrestling now. And yeah, I mean, it. She was cremated, but if she hadn't been, she'd probably be rolling over in her grave every time that happens. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, some shit would come out in that. That's one of those episodes where I would be glued to the screen wanting to hear, the tea as it is from backstage, surrounding that whole situation. I think a lot of people would, and people love a love triangle, and unfortunately, they really love it when it turns out horribly.
Yeah.
So
Unfortunately, it's the ultimate real life soap opera, basically.
exactly, exactly. Well, let's move on to number two. I think China's incredibly likely to be an episode. I would be shocked. Like out of everyone on our list, if it's not her, like if she doesn't get an episode, I would be truly shocked at pretty much all the other ones. I would say, okay, but for her, I think that she would be a highlight of season three.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, so number two on our list is someone who is still living, fortunately, and that is the one and only Perry Saturn. This was actually one that you suggested, so I'll let you lead in with it.
Yeah, so I have been hearing, I listen to Conrad's podcast all the time, something to wrestle with 83 weeks. And a lot of them, especially what happened whenever they go back and watch old WCW footages, they when they look at stuff that involves Saturn, they're always like, yeah, he has a GoFundMe page now. He has all of these health problems and stuff like that. And I said that he would be a top candidate because if you look at his career, his injuries probably speak for itself. He's had a bunch of concussions and stuff like that, especially wrestling when he first started in ECW of all places. So he had to have, multiple concussions from that. He didn't have the best time in WCW, and in WWE, he was made to love a mop. So, you know, I think like his story pretty much speaks for itself and stuff like that. So that's why I suggested him because I feel as though there's probably a good bit of material with him to unravel.
There's a lot. I mean, there was a 2001 incident where he attacked a jobber, Mike Bell, during an episode of I think it was Jacked, WWF Jacked or whatever it was at the time. But yeah, I remember reading about this a while back. So it was a jobber and he had done like a snapmare, and Saturn landed on his head, and I guess like the guy he either Mike Bell messed up the move or Saturn perceived that he messed up the move, and so Saturn just like beat his ass like
Oof.
right then and there. Tossed him
Yeah.
out of the ring. The dude landed on his head outside of the ring, and it was a whole big deal. So that's good. That's almost like a New Jack type, situation. And there was no serious injuries, but they definitely would have a lot of material on him from WCW, which I think the way he was presented in WCW, in the Flock, in the Revolution, and all that stuff. And I mean, he feuded with Guerrero, Ernest Miller, Jericho, all these guys, and then you see the way he was presented in WWF. I mean, it was completely different ultimately. And I don't know if maybe they thought that he just wasn't clicking, or what, but this is definitely another instance where WWF just decided, hey, we don't have a stake in this person anymore, and they're gonna fall by the wayside.
Yeah, and well, also, you also forget that in WCW he was made to wear a dress.
That's true. That is
so,
true.
so, I mean, it's just that's why I said him because I feel as though there's going to be a lot of stuff because they will probably go in there with like this guy, he he had the look. I mean, if you look at his in ring work, I mean, he's vicious, kind of thing. Like he looks like he looked like he could kill you in the ring and stuff like that. But for whatever reason, no one thought to push him to the moon, kind of thing. So, yeah, I think that he's definitely one that they could do. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't get an episode. Like I wouldn't be surprised if like say China, if she didn't get an episode, then I would be shocked. But Saturn, yeah, he's one of those. But I could definitely see them talking about it though.
Well, and the other thing about Saturn too is, he is still alive. He's I'm not sure what his like health condition is or whatever. That's definitely somebody they could cover
Not
later.
too good from what I understand.
Yeah, it's definitely somebody they could cover later if they needed to. But it's like if you're gonna get one of these episodes, he probably would rather be alive for it. I don't know. I don't know if it's. I guess if you're still alive, it's probably an honor to have a Dark Side of the Ring episode to an extent. Um,
Maybe
but if
depends on
not,
what they say about you.
right? I mean, and this is definitely one that they would get Jericho on for,
Hmm.
because it was Benoit, Malenko, Saturn, and Guerrero that came over kind of as the four from WCW. Jericho was separate, but out of those four, I mean, Malenko, couldn't continue in the ring anymore. So, for health concerns. Otherwise, I would hope they would have done something great with him
Yeah,
because Malenko is amazing.
yeah.
But Saturn's definitely got the worst end of that stick. I mean, it's hard to blame them because look at the other three guys. You weren't gonna. I mean, you weren't gonna not push Benoit. You weren't gonna not push Guerrero. And had Malenko been in good shape and been able to keep going, I mean, the bell to bell, there was very few people who could go with Dean Malenko. So yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean,
I've often wondered, real quick, if I could, on Malenko. I've often wondered, like, if he could, still go at that rate at that time. If they had just polished up his mic skills. Because if you listen to this guy in interviews, he is one of the funniest people I've ever heard in interviews. And you're
yeah.
just like, this is not at all the guy that you saw in front of the camera. And like everyone in the industry says that. Like they're just like, how's this guy like have no personality in front of the camera, but when the camera's off, this guy's like just a hoot, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, but the thing about it, in WCW, they gave him that Iceman gimmick. And it
Hmm.
worked. I mean, it was believable. This guy came to the ring, and it was like, it was almost like Harley Race's persona to the extent that he was there to kick your ass. And that's what he was gonna do unless you stopped him.
Yeah.
And he was believable. James Drake, is somebody who's similar. Um, you
This is
know,
very true.
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, when they
He's
come through the
fascinating
curtain,
music.
yeah, when they come through the curtain, they can project that, and that's kind of a lost art in wrestling. So, but yeah, I mean, as far as Perry Saturn, they definitely can get the right people. He definitely has the amount of fame and the career to fill out an episode. So, um, I definitely would be interested in watching one about him.
Yeah, I think
Um,
so.
Number three on our list, this guy is going to get an episode, whether it's this season or not. But I would be pretty shocked if he did not get an episode soon, season 3 or 4 probably, and that is Brian Pillman Sr. for
Oh
the
yeah.
record. And one of the things that I immediately mentioned about Brian Pillman was that Brian Pillman Jr., who is his son, and is currently wrestling on the indie scene. He works with MLW. Rising star in the wrestling business. They could get him on for an episode, not only to, which would definitely enhance his profile in the wrestling business, from him being on an episode of Dark Side of the Ring. But also, he has a lot of insight into the situation. It would be great to hear from him about this. Um, Hell, they could get Steve Austin, maybe.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Oh
I
yeah.
would, I would lose it. That would be amazing if they could get Steve Austin.
Hell,
Um,
what if we could get him to narrate it?
that How did neither one of us say that for narrator? I would love, man, if they got Steve Austin to narrate.
I just thought of that too. I was just like, wow, he could really narrate the whole thing,
I mean,
actually.
he has an absolute. I mean, it's Steve Austin. I got chills thinking about how amazing that would be. Um,
Right?
but so Brian Pillman, he died back in '97. So it's definitely, it's been a little while, but he's definitely somebody that people remember, that people still talk about. And then there was the famous Pillman's Got a Gun segment, which will go down in history. And he was part of the Heart Foundation for a little while. I mean, he was really close with the Hart family, which they've already covered a lot of the sort of tragedy around that family. Um,
So then
so
basically, you would probably have Bret Hart in that episode.
yeah, yeah, probably so. And we know that he's willing to do it.
Right.
So yeah, so yeah, I mean, I think that he's definitely right for an episode. And he has the tragic death story. Died of a heart attack in his hotel room,
Yeah.
like a lot of wrestlers back then.
And but it's not just that. There's also a lot of stuff that he faced throughout his career that could be a lot of meat on the bone for this story. He was in that terrible motorcycle accident that shattered his ankle, and Bruce Pritchard has even said it, and a lot of other people said it, that like after he had his ankle shattered and was not able to be the Brian Pillman that he once was, at least bell to bell, it changed him, and it changed him in a very negative way, kind of thing. Like he wasn't the same, basically. So they could talk about that. They could talk about all of the frustrations that he had to deal with in WCW, some of the frustrations leading into Well, I don't know how much frustrations he had in WWE, but one of the things they could probably do, which they tend to do a lot, is they could tie certain storylines to that. You remember, like his last storyline, which is sad if you really think about it, is he was messing with Gold Dust's wife, Terry Runnels, at the time. They were involved in this feud, and the stipulation was if he won, he would take Marlena for 30 days, basically, kind of thing. And I was like, ooh, that's the last storyline that he was involved in. Not, he won the title at this thing, or, he triumphed over this thing. That's his final storyline. So it's like, ugh, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of tragedy there. In 2008, his adopted daughter died in a car accident as well, and she wrestled under the name Lexi Pillman, sexy Lexi Pillman. So
Oh, that's what happened.
yeah,
Okay.
she died in a car accident in 2008, man. So I would love to hear Pillman Jr. come on and talk about that. And he's such a professional and such a nice guy. So I definitely don't want it seen as like him banking on family tragedy, but I do think that it would do a lot for him to be able to come on Dark Side of the Ring and talk about it because of how big Dark Side of the Ring has gotten. And I think a lot of people would be interested in hearing his father's story for sure.
I think so. And especially, hearing it not from the WWE DVD perspective, kind of thing.
Yeah, as we found out, that's often bullshit. Uh, that's kind of the best thing about Dark Side of the Ring, really, is like like the Montreal Screwjob episode. We talked about this in that episode. You can go check it out right now on Facebook or YouTube. Uh, but shameless plug. But we talked about in that episode that me personally, I was always on Sean's side of this thing. I was just like, Bret Hart was a dick. He wasn't honoring the, age old tradition of you lose on the way out, you put the next guy over on the way out. And that always struck a nerve with me, and it really affected my opinion of Bret Hart. But now seeing the truth of it, or at least way closer to the truth of it than we ever got from WWE about this, I definitely understand exactly why Brett felt the way he felt and why he did things the way he did them. And it really makes me not like Shawn Michaels. I mean, I really didn't like his work a lot before he came back anyway. I mean, I think his body of work after he came back from the back injury um, is
Oh well, that was an amazing Shawn Michaels. I
yeah,
can't, especially have one of the greatest matches I've ever seen with the Undertaker.
yeah. I mean, if you ask me off the top of my head, like, what's your favorite wrestling match of all time? The first match that's going to come to my mind is him and Kurt Angle at WrestleMania 21.
Oh God, it was so good.
That's the first match that's going to come to mind. I watched it just the other day, and it was still just as good as it was then. I mean, I that match is just it is the perfect like story of the Olympic athlete going against the showboat, and they both try to do each other's styles. Sean tries to wrestle with Kurt. Kurt brings in the flashy stuff against Sean. I mean, it just God, it was just so good, and the feud was good. And then the payoff was good, and that's one of those things that's so rare anymore. Either the feud, the build up is
And
not
don't
good.
forget about Sexy Kurt.
Oh yeah, I how could you? Either the feud and the build-up is good and then the match disappoints, or the feud and the build-up isn't any good and then the match is great. But it's so
Like,
rare anymore that you get all the hype and the build-up and then the match over delivers, and it did, man. Now I think
yeah.
they had another match at SummerSlam and it was still like it. It was still an amazing match. I mean, it could main event any card, but just wasn't. It couldn't be as good as the first one. They just couldn't do it.
Oh yeah.
I feel the same way about Sean and Taker about their
Especially their first meeting at 25, the buildup for it was like heaven versus hell kind of thing. Oh my God, it
yeah
wrote itself kind of thing.
yeah absolutely. But as we often do on this program, we have gotten way off track. Uh, Brian Pillman is number 3. Number 4 is somebody that you also are all probably very familiar with, and that is none other than Test.
Yes. Yes, and I suggested this one as well. I thought about this one because he died from a drug overdose,
Yep.
and he was around that time when well, obviously the Benoit thing would happen a number of years later. Well, actually, not too far from that, but around that time, Test came from that era where it's just like you're running, 800 miles a minute kind of thing on the road with WWE. You can tell he abused steroids. I mean, like, there's some guys you can tell and you can't tell. When you looked at Test, it was like, okay, yeah, that guy's on steroids, kind of thing. But they can talk about his background because remember, he didn't come, you know, from the indie scene or anything like that. He came from actually being a bodyguard for Motley Crue.
Yeah. Yeah. Whose stadium tour was unfortunately just pushed back to next year due to the virus. I know because my mom was going to go to that, and
Right.
they finally just announced that they were pushing that back. Anyway, uh, uh, I have a very short attention span, folks. But anyway, yeah, he passed in 2009, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
something like that.
yeah, I mean, and he was definitely involved in a lot of angles that people definitely remember him. He did the infamous TNA angle, not TNA, but T and A,
Yeah,
and the Stephanie McMahon relationship. He was in the corporation, I think,
yes, he
for a
was.
while.
Yes,
And then he played a major role in the big invasion angle that everybody remembers as well.
he did, and I think the one that they would, if anything, there's two storylines that they would probably follow more than anything. which is the anti-American that he did with because I believe he was from Canada as well. I think he was.
Yep,
Um,
Ontario.
yeah. So him, Christian, and Lance Storm were like doing the whole, Canadians versus USA thing. And like there was a segment, there were two Raws actually in a row where they threatened to burn the American flag type of thing. So that one they would probably definitely focus on. Another one they would definitely focus on would be the storyline that they did with Stacy Keebler.
Yes, I will never forget the angle where Hogan had the Hulkamaniacs, Kane had the Canaanites, The Rock had the people, and then Stacy Keebler suggests that he call his fan base the Testicles.
Ah,
And you can and that segment is just made even better by JR describing Vince McMahon's love of all things that like toilet humor type stuff. You could just hear Vince McMahon just laughing his ass off as that suggested to him.
oh god, but yeah. So there you go. They could definitely do that. They'll probably also. I'm sure something happened to him while he was because he worked for TNA. He did one pay per view with them and one matchup with them, which was Sting and Abyss were in the matchup. So was AJ Styles and Tonko, and I believe Christian was in that as well. And it was a cage match. And when you see Test come out in that, like he already looks like an inflatable action figure kind of
Oh
thing. Like,
man.
like when you see him, like when I saw him on the DVD, and this was like when he was alive and stuff like that, and I saw the DVD, I was like, oh my god, dude, like that does not look good. Like you look like it looked like he was about to explode right then and there. That like he could have just gone pop at any time and just like drop dead. Like
Ugh.
that's how bad it looks. So yeah, I would say he would be one that would definitely draw attention to for viewers because people do know him. They know of the name, and anytime you say anyone from the Attitude Era, immediately people are going to tune in.
And random trivia, he actually when he did a short stint on the independent circuit and had a feud at a few different indie promotions with Samoa Joe. So
Really?
yeah, so if they could get footage of that, just put that out. I'll watch that. Uh, I'm a huge mark for Samoa Joe. So,
Yes.
all right, so yeah, so number 4 is Test. Moving on to number 5, this is somebody that I think we're definitely going to see something on at some point,
Yeah.
and that is Mr. Mike Awesome.
Yes.
Um,
Who unfortunately committed suicide.
exactly makes him very ripe for a Dark Side of the Ring episode, as so many of them end in the subject's tragic death. Um, so uh, Mike Awesome is somebody that is really divisive. Like everybody that I know that has an opinion on Mike Awesome, one way or the other, it's either he was, for lack of a better word, awesome, or they just thought he was awful. And I'm somebody who really loves like technical wrestling and stuff like that. We talked earlier about the Shawn versus Kurt match, but there's just something about a giant guy that power bombs people obsessively that I just like. And
How can you not?
yeah, I was always very entertained by him. I just was, and I realized that he can't wrestle his way out of a paper bag. I get it, but in the
You don't
words
have
of
to, though.
right, in the words of Vince Russo, I'm totally entertained right now. I just, I'm very entertained, and he had a pretty interesting career in ECW. He wrestled in Japan considerably, I believe. Um,
Yeah. In fact, just a little bit more backstory on that because I've seen some of his Japan work, and a lot of his Japan stuff comes from a promotion called FMW, Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling, which was basically ECW before. That's where East like Paul Heyman watched FMW basically and said, "All right, I can Americanize that." basically.
Mm,
He had a working relationship as well with FMW, which is how he got Mike Awesome and Masato Tanaka. And if you look at a lot of their matches and you look at the matches he just had in Japan, dude, the number of times that he got hit in the head with the steel chair, I lost count.
yeah. I mean, he
Like,
probably was, very much along the Chris Benoit, situation where he probably had multiple concussions throughout
mhm.
his time in wrestling.
hmm I would say that one. So, they would be talking about that. They would talk about, him. They will talk about, if they do it, they'll talk about his time in ECW, obviously, and how he became a huge star. But then they'll talk about how he betrayed ECW as well. Remember that. He had
Yeah,
the infamous, at the relaunch of Nitro with the Bischoff and Russo era, he comes in and attacks Nash, and he technically is still not technically, he is the ECW World Heavyweight Champion, and he's still under contract. So they'll talk about that and how that probably soured a lot of backstage relations with him.
yeah, yeah. I mean, apparently he was owed money, and he refused to re-sign with ECW until he was paid. So if that's true, then I don't really begrudge him for that. But as short as his stint was in WCW, they had him as the fat chick thriller, Mike Awesome,
Oh god, that 70s guy.
fucking gold. Yeah, I mean, fucking gold. Awful, awful, terrible,
Yes.
but gold, but
Yeah,
absolute gold.
it's entertaining when you look back at it, especially when you hear Tony Schiavone on commentary go, "Is he playing to those girls?" Oh my god! Oh,
I would give money for it, like to have Jim Ross dub over some of that and just hear him have to be like the fat chick thriller, Mike Awesome.
ah. And I'm sure when he went to because he did go to WWE, but he only went there for the invasion angle.
Yeah. Well, and
So,
and 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 one night stand,
oh, so yeah, yeah, yeah. He did, and he fought Masato Tanaka of
and they
all
had a
people.
damn good match, man.
They did, but you go back and you watch it, and how he ends up. You kind of look at that, and you might go, "Ooh, I don't know if all those chair shots were a good idea."
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
mean, there was
He
a spot.
probably had CTE. I mean,
Oh yeah, because there was a spot, and I remember like there was a spot that they did almost every time they wrestled, just the two of them, where they would literally just take the chair and just beat each other over the head with like senselessly. And then I remember also, I'm sure he probably had a bunch of neck problems as well, because I've seen it to where like Masato would pick him up in the power bomb and would power bomb him over the ring ropes onto the floor, onto a table, and you can just see him like hit the back of his head on the concrete. That cannot be good for long term, growth, basically.
right? Yeah, yeah. He probably had CTE. Yeah, I think it's almost a definite. We'll never know, but I think it's almost a definite.
And again, he would be one of those that just like New Jack would draw viewers.
Yeah, exactly. Full disclaimer: I am not a doctor, so I don't know if for sure if he had CTE or not.
I'm pretty sure when they look back at it, he probably did. But who
Yeah,
knows? And that's what they could uncover with that
yeah,
episode.
true,
But
true.
here's the question: who would they get then to speak on his behalf?
That's true. I mean, well, for one, they could get New Jack. They could get Sandman. Both of them were incredibly entertaining. Is Tanaka still alive? Right?
Tanaka, yeah, I believe he's still alive. I don't know if he speaks a word of English though, like that.
They could always translate for him.
That's true. They could.
You know?
I could see that one. I could see Jeff Jarrett.
Yeah,
because he did some stuff. Well, I guess not now that he's involved with WWE, but who
true.
knows?
But I mean, maybe Heyman could come on.
Vince
Well,
Russo.
no, hey, yeah, Russo for sure, but Heyman has not been on, right?
Oh yeah, no, he hadn't been on a single one.
If they could get Heyman, then he would have been on the New Jack episode.
Oh,
So yeah, Heyman is not trying to ruin his chances to continue to make money from WWE by being on Dark Side of the Ring, unless they pay him a shit ton, which they might. I mean, they're sinking more money into the program, so we'll see.
yeah, Vice might flip the bill for it.
Yeah, we'll see. But I mean, Sandman was such an entertaining guest. Would love to have him on there. Rhino could come on and speak about it.
Ryan could definitely be do one.
So there's a lot of people. They could get Kevin Nash on there.
Yeah, I would say Russo though, especially talking about WCW days, because
we're
he
we're
probably.
we're always happy to get Russo on there. Russo's behind the fat chick Thrilla.
Oh, of course, especially that '70s guy.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Um, all right, so this next one is actually one that I think that they could do a lot on, and that is the infamous Jerry Lawler Andy Kaufman feud, which you know. I wonder if maybe this would be the venue for them to finally come out and say that it was a work completely, because so many of the things that cover this, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, there's Man on the Moon that covers it.
Tremendous movie.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. But a lot of the works that cover, a lot of the different things that cover this feud, nobody really talks about how it was really a work. Because it's
Yeah,
one of the best works of all time. The American public believed this wholeheartedly through and through.
yeah. I mean, you look at the infamous Johnny Carson on the Tonight Show. The Tonight Show never covered, like, especially like back in those days, never even looked at wrestling like that. So
Yeah,
for that segment to get on that show, like, yeah, that's a big deal. You know, the thing is, though, what's funny about that, you should mention that they had this Netflix documentary on not necessarily the making of that movie, but what Jim Carrey did to tap into the character kind of thing. Because he was in full character mode during that whole he was a huge Andy Kaufman fan growing up. So like he wanted to get in full character mode. And there was actually an incident where Jerry Lawler comes to film that scene and he's like, refusing to work with him and stuff because he's in character mode, and he thought that that's what Andy did. And Jerry Lawler tried to like get to him and say, "Hey man, we didn't actually hate each other.
yeah,
Like we actually worked together to make this. That's why you think you
yeah.
hate me," kind of thing.
It,
So
it is one of the greatest, if not the greatest works of all time.
yes,
And I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they are willing to go into it or not, but I would be beyond thrilled to see something like that. Now, Lawler, of course, under contract, so
that was my
or
only thing is you have to have Jerry Lawler then for it.
yeah, you
Yeah,
do. You do. They could get plenty of other people, but and they probably could even get Jim Carrey.
I
Uh,
was gonna say they might could use him.
but if you can't get Lawler, then I don't see you being able to effectively do this episode.
Right.
So, unless they can, unless he can get, the okay from WWE to come on and talk about this, because I don't think there's a way for this to really portray them in a negative way. So maybe they would okay it, but I doubt they're going to do Vice any favors. I'm sure Vince McMahon fucking hates them. So, uh, but there's just
Well,
so
he
much
wants
of this, and this is
he
such
wants
a
anything that
big
he
deal.
can't control.
That exactly, yeah, yeah. You're very right about that. Yeah,
I,
power
so
hungry.
So that's like why he, he hates anything outside of wrestling that talks about wrestling, that he can't control.
Yeah. Yeah, he
Um,
wants to be the authoritative voice on what pro wrestling is in the
yeah.
world. Yeah, scary. Um, and we
Didn't
almost ended
cut
up in
you
a
off.
world like that. What's that?
Oh, I said didn't mean to cut you off, by the way.
Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, but I mean, there's just so much here, and the public was incredibly into this, and it's so famous. It's such a famous deal that people would watch it. I think you would bring in new viewers with it, but once again, the kicker on this is can you get Lawler? Because I don't know if you can make this without him. So
No, you can't. You have to have him obviously for it. So
yeah. All right, so number 7 is a little bit different than kind of everything else on the list so far, but this is definitely something that's going to come up, and it's possible that they even could um, kind of wrap Test and several other people into this if they wanted to cover it all together, and that is the WWF steroid trial. Um, so this was a really famous event that kind of we've talked a lot about how the media is just sitting around waiting for pro wrestling to be viewed in a more negative light. And in 1993, the New York District Attorney, or a U.S. Attorney, I think maybe even, um, you know, basically charged Vince McMahon with obtaining anabolic steroids for use in WWF. Essentially, that they were not only not monitoring whether or not the wrestlers were on steroids, this was way worse than that. They were obtaining and providing them
yeah,
for the talent. And there were so many people that were named in that. I mean, there was a lot. I mean, Ultimate Warrior obviously is the first person that comes to mind because the dude was definitely using. Um, but
Hulk Hogan,
Hogan, Piper,
Jim
Warrior,
Duggan.
Vince himself, Jim Duggan. I mean, there was just a lot of people that were on this, and it was a huge deal, and it almost brought the company down.
Yes, it did. It was a big deal, and I didn't realize like how big it was, because I was just a kid at the time, and then looking back at it, and it really hurt WWE's business in the around 94 and 95. You started to see more and more attendance, fading from WWE. They were still, obviously creatively and stuff like that. They were, slipping, but it was just the public's perception of it. They didn't really want to, I guess, support someone who they thought would do that
Yeah,
kind of thing. And, that is, to be quite honest, when WCW made its rise because they took advantage of, all of the negative press that WWE was getting. And that's when Hogan left and went to WCW. That's when Macho Man left and went to WCW. That's when the Monday Night Wars started. But it really begins though with the steroid trial, and it was a big deal. And it's a big deal because people don't really know what to think about it, because on one hand it's like, oh well, steroids are used to cheat in sports and stuff like that, especially baseball. It's used to hit a home run harder. It's in football, it's used to make you run faster and stuff like that kind of thing, or at least that's the general thought. But the issue with steroids in wrestling is it's like, can you really condemn them for using steroids? Because I mean, they're not winning anything, they're not actually competing on anything, and so that's always been the major issue. And so yeah, they could definitely, I mean, to me, you could do a whole series on the steroid trial if you
well,
wanted to.
I mean, it was illegal though. They
It
were
was,
obtaining
it was.
prescription drugs without prescriptions from a physician for talent to be used for purposes that no legitimate doctor would okay.
Right.
So I mean that was kind of the point of it, was that they were breaking the law here.
Yeah.
They were essentially trafficking drugs. I mean that's how the federal government saw it.
Allegedly, we have to, say. I mean, uh, still, which is something, which is probably why they should do an episode on that. So we could get the full thing, because the only thing that I kind of really know about this is from two places: the Vince McMahon DVD, because they obviously address it in his DVD, and then the 50 years of WWE DVD. They mentioned that, and I hate that little bullshit narrative in there from Stephanie McMahon. My father set us down as children. You're going to hear a lot of things. I'm going to tell you what's true and what's not. I'm like, yeah, okay. What's true and what's not?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if there's any footage out there of that courtroom scene, because allegedly the courtroom like burst into like cheers when the not guilty verdict was read.
I've
So,
heard
yeah, I mean, I would be interested to see that if it exists. So,
it
this
might. Who knows?
but this is definitely high profile. They could get the right people to talk about it, and it was a big deal. And they were probably actually guilty of it, but neither here nor there. So, number 8 on this list has a very interesting tale. And this was another one that I didn't even think of that you brought up. So I'm gonna let you talk about it. But number 8 is none other than Louis Spicolli.
Yeah. So I suggested him because I believe his death is drug overdose as well. I believe something it's something close to it. But the reason I suggested him was because there was a rumor, and I'm not sure if it's a confirmed rumor, and this would be something that they would address, and if they did it. But I always heard that Louis Spicolli was like how the guys were doing drugs, he was supplying the drugs, like he was like the ultimate drug dealer locker room guy
Yep.
for everyone.
And he worked with someone that we are very fond of here on the show, Mr. Herb Abrams and the UWF. So
Yeah,
he could have been Herb Abrams' cocaine dealer, in which case he would have been a very wealthy man.
yeah, yes, he would. But I would say one of them that you would have to get for this episode would be Tommy Dreamer.
Yep.
Tommy Dreamer worked really close with Louis Spicolli. He has a lot of good things to say about Louis. In fact, he has the DVD, but he doesn't call it the Death Valley Driver. He calls it the Louis Spicolli Driver, or
Yeah.
he calls it the Spicolli Driver.
Yeah. Larry Zabisco. Uh, he had a feud with Spicoli.
Yeah, he did like a short thing with him and Hall actually in WCW, which therefore I said about the drug dealer guy, Scott Hall.
Yeah. Either one of them would be good to come on and talk about
Yeah,
this one. And they're not against, you kind of think, all right, so how famous is the person, right? And obviously Louis McCauley is not, probably not, from a fame perspective, anywhere near anybody else on this list. But I mean, they've done lesser known folks,
yeah.
especially when there's yeah, especially when there's a twist on it, such as this, where this guy was possibly dealing drugs to the locker room. He died of I believe it was somas and wine, and they found like testosterone and pain pills and all kind of stuff in his house. So yeah, I mean, it
And
was
he could have gotten hooked up with the wrong people too.
yeah. Yeah, there's no telling how it actually turned out, but I think they could do a pretty interesting episode about him, and I think the right people could come on and talk about it. So I mean, even if he himself maybe doesn't fit the exact bill for it, but the tragic circumstances, the drug relationship, or perhaps what he could have been doing on the side, as well as getting the right people in the room to talk about it. I think it checks all of those boxes. So I could see them doing an episode on this at some point.
And he also wrestled for multiple promotions. He
Right.
wrestled for ECW, ECW. He even wrestled for WWE a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah, I mean, he was a jobber in WWE, obviously, but yeah. So that's why I said like that's why it's such a huge rumor that he was this big time drug guy because literally throughout every promotion, I think they would go to him to get their drugs
Yeah.
or
For
a
sure.
number of them. I don't, not necessarily all of them, but a number of guys would go to him. So,
Yeah. I mean, Vampiro can't sell everything.
yeah,
He probably
true.
should be on this list, but spoilers, he isn't. But Vampiro, we'll talk about. We can get to that.
Yeah,
Um.
I didn't think about him.
Yeah. So. All right. So number 8, Louis Spicoli. Number 9. So this is an interesting one, and this is somebody that probably should have been higher up on the list. Earlier, I mentioned that we would be shocked if China didn't get an episode, and this is probably the number 2 person on the list as far as that goes. That if they don't get an episode, season 3 or 4, that I would be absolutely just floored that they've overlooked this person, and that would be Ashley Massaro.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, he unfortunately also, as we know, committed suicide. God, it's a bad trend in wrestling, man.
and the tragedy is there. um you know um she I think she did what, like it was a drug overdose, intentional drug overdose.
Yeah, it's something like that. I think so. Um, but she and if you might think, well, what I mean, just because they commit suicide or something like that, what else is there to talk about? Well, the fact that she did the diva search at the time and she won, but she was not their ideal type of diva.
Right.
She was punk rock, kind of thing. I know for a fact they made her get boob implants.
Hmm.
um, I'm pretty sure they did. Because I know that she got them, but I'm pretty sure that she got them after she won, like
Well,
the diva search and became a diva.
WWE was definitely famous for either heavily suggesting for the talent to do that, or even pressuring them to do it, or
Yeah,
demanding that they do it. So
yeah.
that's definitely something that could be talked about.
Hmm.
Um, she was on Survivor even. She was on a season of Survivor, which
I heard that.
yeah, in the days China, Taiwan, something like that, one of those. She was on one of those as well. She had a short career, but the time that she was on screen, she was very heavily featured. She was definitely pushed
She would
heavily.
be champion.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot there. For her to for them to talk to on the talk about in this episode about her. And there's tons of people they could bring on. Trish Stratus, Lita, anybody that worked with her in the Diva Search, anybody that worked with her in WWE at the time or after. Um, her daughter is still around. She
Um,
was she
yeah,
she was also part of a major class action lawsuit against WWE, so they could go into that on the episode.
yeah, and they could probably talk, and you might could even have this person on there. I don't know how in good taste it would be, but they could have Reba Hardy, because towards the end, fact, I want to say like a week before she committed suicide, she was in like a little Twitter feud with Rebuy Hardy. In fact, there was rumors. I'm not sure if it's confirmed or not. It might be true, more than likely, but there was talks that Matt Hardy was getting drugs from Ashley Marceau. Might even had an affair with her, which is why Rebuy Hardy does not like her and said very mean and awful things even after she died, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely shouldn't get her on there, but that
They shouldn't put that on, but I feel as though they probably will address like that
right.
situation because that has to have something to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, so I looked it up here, and actually, she was a suicide by hanging. It was not a drug overdose.
Oh,
Um, so yeah, I mean, yeah, I
oh,
mean, this one is right for Dark Side of the Ring. There's so much tragedy around it. Um, so it's it's unfortunate. But she definitely would be somebody that would, that could be, um, that could be talked about for an hour. Uh, she made a lot of pop culture appearances. She was on Extreme Makeover. She was on Smallville. We talked about her being on Survivor. So she was a celebrity. I mean,
he made an appearance in Red Theory's music video. I know that.
yeah. So I definitely would be interested in seeing an episode about her. And she's her death was, feels like it was incredibly recent. Because I mean, it was 2019, just last year.
What I thought it was 2018.
I could look it up here. No, May 15th, 2019. It's barely been a
Oh,
year.
there you
It's
go.
awful.
Wow. Oof.
Yeah, so yeah, that's still on a lot of people's minds, and I could see them doing an episode about it.
Yes, I could definitely see it.
All right, moving right along. Number 10 on the list, and this one sort of, every season they do an episode that's sort of featured around an event or an organization. Like they did UPW, they did the Brawl for All, or not UPW, UWF. Why am I thinking UPW? Number 10 is the fall of XPW.
Yeah. I suggested this one. And the reason I suggested this one, all right, because people might think, well, who really cares about that? The reason why is because I feel as though if you looked into XPW, there is more to this because when I say this, I'm not exaggerating. It is literally owned by people. Well, it was owned, I should say. It was owned by people who ran the porn industry or who were in the porn industry. Rob Black was the owner of XPW, and he had produced porn. Literally, his wife, who was Lizzie Borden in XPW, and I believe is her, well, I guess her porn name, I guess, but she had never stepped foot in a wrestling ring a day in her life before XPW, and yeah, she was in porn. So I feel as though they should do this one because I cannot for the life of me think that this promotion was run by people who knew what they were doing. I mean, because I've seen the footage of XPW. It's some of like if you think Vince Russo stuff is actually good compared to XPW. All right, like it's just it it was an awful promotion, and I for the life of me cannot think that like because what they wanted to do was they wanted to combine extreme hardcore wrestling, and not just hardcore wrestling, but like Japanese style death matches with basically hot chicks, porn basically. And they thought that it was a formula that could work. Obviously, it did not. I mean, it didn't draw flies, basically. Um, And I cannot see anyone that was there that was qualified to make sure that these guys had a safe match, kind of thing. Um, in
Yeah.
fact, if you really want to look at it, look at the New Jack Vic Grimes incident
Yeah,
that we talked
which
about.
yeah, the infamous scaffold incident where Vic Grimes was almost murdered by New Jack on television
Yeah,
happened in XPW.
yeah. So you think someone qualified to run a wrestling business would book that match, or would even suggest that match, or would have a way? It's like let's say someone did get seriously injured. Who's going to help them? Like there, to me, there was not a trained medical staff. They could say that there was, but there definitely wasn't, kind of thing. So I just feel as though, yeah, there's got to be a lot of good stuff here because um like I said, I heard stories about XPW. I've seen their footage. Let me just say this about XPW that sums it up. All right, one of their matches, which was a pay per view, by the way, you had to pay to see this matchup, was called a Raw Sewage match. Yeah. So basically, uh, kind of like a hog pen match, only with raw sewage.
Fucking awful. There's not a booking fee in the world, my friend. There's just not. I mean, yeah, dude. Yeah, so I wasn't hugely familiar with this until you told me about it, and then I started looking into it. And I mean, Rob Black and Lizzie Borden were into some incredibly just off the wall shit.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
some of the stuff that she's directed, like her porn work, like is just way off the rails.
Yeah.
Uh, no judgment, whatever you're into, but way off the rails. And yeah, there is definitely plenty that they could uncover here, and they could frame it in a very similar way that as they did to Herb Abrams in the UWF.
Yeah. Now, Rob Black is still living. He is not dead or
Yeah,
anything. He
Lizzie
is,
Borden too, I think, right?
yes, she's still living as well. I believe they're still married. I could be wrong. I don't know, but the last I heard that Rob Black is working at a burger joint. He's
Hmm.
like the manager of a burger joint or something like that. I don't know. Maybe it's actually a very successful burger place. I don't know, but I just feel like, I said the raw sewage. There's actually one that's even worse that for XBW. There is literally a segment, not a backstage promo, but a promo nonetheless, where they basically recreate the Clockwork Orange house scene. You know which one I'm talking about? From like back in the day where he's singing "I'm singing in the rain" and he
Yeah.
attacks the old couple and like rapes the girl basically. Yet they tried to do that with GQ Money and some other people. Like actually they tried to do that on Lizzie Borden, and I went, what is this? Like it just, I just don't understand. Like even Vince Russo would look at that and go, bro, that's too much of a swerve, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. Way too much, bro. Bro.
I'm totally not entertained by this.
Totally not.
But that's one I just feel as though if you wanted to do one that would just allow you to be sit back and be kind of entertained by this fledgling promotion,
Totally entertained.
that would be one. That would be one. I feel strongly about that one. I'm like, yeah, you could do that one, and it wouldn't piss anyone in WWE off.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, folks, I mean that's our 10 list. So, that's our predictions for season 3 of Dark Side of the Ring. When they come out with the episode list, we'll probably talk a little bit about how accurate we were, and maybe we'll do a preview episode where we kind of make some predictions about the episode list. I think it'll be a while. Probably next year before we get an official episode list. Um, there were some other people that we considered for this list. that for whatever reason they didn't meet the criteria we were looking for, or we just didn't think there was enough for uh, an episode about them. So we could definitely talk about some of them now. Earlier we mentioned Jake Roberts, and one of the things we talked about with Jake is, we talked about the different criteria. Well, is there enough material to uncover about Jake Roberts that he hasn't spoken publicly about often, or hasn't already been covered in the documentary? And I think that it fails that one hard, because Jake Roberts, I saw him speak at Dragon Con last year, and it was one of those things where it was life changing. I mean, it definitely changed my life just hearing him tell his story, sitting 10 feet from him. The guy was, I mean, it was just one of those people where you sit out and listen to him talk, and it literally changes you. And I will never forget that experience. But on that same note, it's like the guy's already come out and talked about pretty much everything that's happened with him. So I don't know if, while I do think it would still be an entertaining episode, and I would gladly sit down and watch and do an episode of this show about it. I just don't
Oh,
know if there's enough to uncover.
yeah, that was my feeling as well. That like obviously he has a story that they could do. It'd be very easy to do one on him, but I think that we've already heard everything that there is to hear from his story, kind of thing. I don't think that he's been shy about telling his story over the past few years and stuff like that. Um, and I mean, his transformation, his recovery, it's not even something that he himself needs to talk about even for himself, kind of thing. Like some of these episodes are done, like especially the Benoit episode. A lot of those guys in the Benoit episode had to talk about it because they were like, if we don't talk about this, we're going to explode, kind of thing. Like we've been bottling all of this up, kind of thing. But with Jake, we pretty much seen him say everything. And man, his story is so good because I mean, you look at what he's doing in AEW, and he looks like a completely different man, kind of thing. He has a new outlook on life, and he is still the best promo in this business. I don't care what anyone says.
And it would be nice to have one of these episodes with a happy ending, that actually has like a good, it's a dark story but has a good ending, and there's not a lot of those.
No.
So I would watch it for sure. We talked about Scott Hall. And as I mentioned him, I also want to mention this, that one of the things we discussed was kind of the fall of WCW, and how they could really, if they wanted to do an episode about that, they really could incorporate like Scott Hall, Eric Bischoff, a lot of people's stories. They could kind of incorporate them into that. Um, into that sort of fall of WCW storyline. But once again, that has been covered in detail. But most of the time that it's been covered, like a lot of these other things, like the Montreal Screwjob, it's been covered in within WWE's lens. So I would definitely be interested in seeing that covered outside of their
Yeah,
lens.
and Scott Hall, just like Jake Roberts, has been pretty open about his problems as well. We know pretty much where it started, his problems, which actually wasn't in the ring. It was before that, out in the nightclub,
Right.
kind of thing. He unfortunately, he was defending himself, kind of thing. But he killed a guy basically, um, and he said that it's something that he's had to live with every day of his life, even though people have told him like, "Hey, man, I understand it's a tragic event, but you had no choice. It
Right.
was you or him," kind of thing. So they could go into that. If anything, the best thing for Dark Side of the Ring for that story would be um, his storyline in WCW, where even Bischoff, who probably on the episode will say this as well, that like he used it as a storyline, and he regrets doing that. He was just like, I wish I had never done that kind of thing. Um, so I could see that. I could see, here's another reason I said that it might not be Scott Hall is because he's already had a 30 for 30 on
Mm,
ESPN that covered a lot of this as well. So I'm not sure. I mean, he could still, he's definitely a good candidate for sure. But I think that there's so much more stories that they could tell that we don't know as opposed to, the ones that we already do know. Like, it's like if I saw a story on Scott Hall, I would watch it, but at the same time, I'd be like, well, I already know all this.
same goes for for Flair.
Yeah.
He's pretty much come out about all of his stuff, and it's been heavily covered too, outside of the lens of WWE. Um, we also, let's see, who else we talk about. I would
You
like
know
to
what I
see.
just thought of?
Yep.
Actually, one I
What's that?
just thought of for some reason. Paul Orndorff,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
he injured his neck, and there was a pay per view in WCW in Fall Brawl 2000 where legit on air he suffered like complications. I don't know exactly what happened because I've never watched the pay per view. I'll have to try to stomach my way through it one of these days. But yeah, like I remember, like, you could tell that like one side of him looks completely different from the other because he can't, I guess physically do what he could do at one point. So he could be another one.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Um. Yeah. Orndorff for sure. He would be a good one that could possibly be talked about. I would really like to see an episode about Hogan. And this is one of those where can they get the right people to talk about it? But Hogan's, all his politicking over the years, him being exposed as a blatant racist, uh, him giving the fakest apology backstage to the locker room about it. Basically, the apology wasn't, what he should have come out and said. He should have come out and said, "Yes, I said those racist things. I do not feel that way. I'm trying to be a better person." Something like along those lines.
Instead,
Instead,
I didn't know that I was being filmed.
yeah,
It doesn't matter whether or not you were being filmed. You shouldn't have said it.
yeah, all that does is solidify the fact that you meant those things that you said because you thought you weren't being recorded. And his basically the whole thing was definitely, you guys in this modern day, you got to make sure you're not being recorded. Dude, no. Like it's like the guy doesn't even understand the severity of what it is that he's actually done. Uh and I mean, yeah, I do think he's a racist, and I do think that there's a ton they could talk about here about his politics over the years. But I don't know. Once again, I don't know if you can get the right people to talk about it because you'd have to me you need someone who was present at that backstage meeting where he gave the fake apology. Most of those people still under contract, maybe not all of them.
Mhm.
You need a lot of people that were kind of around him, which, Hogan himself has been on the show. His wife has been on the show. They both, there's something to add to it. They both just got banned from AEW.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I saw that from Tony Khan, and I agree with his explanation as to why.
I fucking love Tony Khan, man.
Oh, I know.
Uh, yeah. So on that note, we're talking about the mega powers. Ultimate Warrior is another guy that they really could cover.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
from all the stuff with WWE. I mean, obviously they did the whole Fall of the Ultimate Warrior WWE thing. What was it? It wasn't Rise and Fall. That was
No, the ultimate destruction of the
yes.
war.
That DVD was pretty damning, and I'm surprised he had anything else to do with them after they came out with it. But
Well,
I
he did
mean,
it for a number of years.
yeah, I mean, there's plenty to go into with that. What one thing I would love for them to talk about is how the Warrior Award was so bastardized. Because he wanted it to be like a backstage, like no name person that is like critical to the shows being put on that like never gets any kind of spotlight or recognition. And they completely twisted it into being this kind of like charity, WWE or these angelic people that help out the community bullshit award. Uh, and that's nothing like what he recommended or what he
Yeah,
suggested.
but I will say this real quick on that. Just a side note: if anyone deserves that award this year, it's Chad Gaspar.
Yes, absolutely, without a doubt. And if he doesn't get it, then I mean I'll be pissed. I don't watch their product anyway, but I'd be pissed.
Yeah.
So, it.
It-
But who
I,
else do you have?
I would think that he, real quick on the Ultimate Warrior, like not just about that DVD, but if you've listened to everyone that has talked about him, from Jim Ross, Jim Cornette, um, hell, Vince Russo, evens, just a lot of people, Bruce Pritchard, he was not a nice guy. I mean, he was like, they said, he used disrespectful language and tone in front of women and children behind the scenes. He was not a well liked guy. So, that, yeah, to me, that right there, he'd be an ultimate candidate for Dark Side of the Ring.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. That's pretty much everybody that I had. Marty Jannetty would be a good one. We don't really have to go into why. I don't feel like it. but yeah. But yeah. I mean, did you have anybody else that would be an honorable mention to our list?
I can't think of anyone other than like what I said, like Paul Orndorff. I think we have to add him to the list.
Uh,
I'm sure that there's a bunch of people that we're missing out on. I thought about this one. I thought about FMW,
mm,
the whole company as a whole, because they were, they were involved in all of the death matches, and especially like the exploding death matches, any type of things like that. And it really messed a lot of people up who were involved in those matches. And ultimately, their product suffered because of it, because it didn't get any bigger with having all of that. The only problem I think would be with FMW is, and I'm not trying to sound funny, but half of the people are dead
right.
that pretty much worked there. So I don't know if they could do that one, but I thought of that one.
And the other half don't speak English.
Yeah, pretty much. So,
We talked about Chris Canyon. We talked about Magnum TA. Um,
Canyon.
those were both kind of on our alternates list.
I said Magnum TA would not work though, in my opinion, because his was not really a ringside tragedy kind of thing. His was just a freak accident, like he got in a wreck kind of thing.
Well, Savage though is was the same way, but he's a little bit more prolific than
Exactly.
than
He
Magnum
had
TA.
a little bit more history, whereas Magnum TA, I mean, you talk to anyone about If anything, what they could do with that, then they could do a whole rivalry with him and Tully Blanchard.
Yeah, and Tully could come on the episode.
So could Tessa,
Yeah, 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 for
because
sure.
I'm sure she has a unique perspective on it, because she's like, I have two fathers, basically.
Is she still the TNA champion?
Yes, she is.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
She hasn't even been on the damn thing too, because she's been trapped in Mexico during this quarantine.
Oh man, that's awful.
I
Yeah,
know.
I mean, yeah, I that shows you how much I watch TNA, folks.
Mm.
Uh, what? But I think we've covered this extensively, so I'm very interested. I've got our list saved, so I'm very interested when they do announce the episode list for us to come back and kind of look at this and see which ones we got right, and for us to speculate a little bit about the ones that maybe we haven't talked about. So
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's been a great series. I will say that if you try to binge watch Dark Side of the Ring, Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that. It will take because I'll be honest, like when we started doing this, and we had to watch multiple ones back to back. It was like, ooh, it can mess with you a little bit. So
Yeah, I mean, it's we don't really talk a lot about like kind of the behind the scenes on this, but we started doing this. We did 2 episodes at a time. We would record 2 episodes and we air one a week. And we stopped doing that, not only because we would run out of material faster, but also because it's kind of depressing to sit here for 3.5 hours and talk about this stuff right after watching 2 hours of it. And then Dave Foster was on last week, and he's one of the cheeriest, like brightest, like just light up the room type people. And he had watched like 2, 3 episodes of Dark Side of the Ring, and he was just so down when when
yeah,
he joined us on the show.
yeah, because
Not to laugh at your despair.
but it's so true. I mean, because I remember specifically like I've already watched the Owen Hart one. I'm gonna have to go back and watch it, obviously again, which I am not looking forward to doing again.
I'm
And
putting it off
I
as long as
watched it.
possible.
Yeah, I watched it, and like what was funny was I was watching like some Attitude Era Raw before that or something like that. I don't know, just really randomly I was watching it. I went to go back and watch it after watching The Dark Side of the Ring. I was like, I, I can't do anything wrestling right now. I can't. It's
Yeah.
too depressing after a while. So um I'm looking forward to covering it still, but at the same time, I'm also like dreading it. I'm like, ugh, it's
It's
just so tragic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to making it a really special episode. I definitely want to have a guest on that has a special connection to him, or was a very big fan of his. So we're definitely going to talk about that off mic, and I want it
Oh,
to be a really special episode. I want it to be uh, monumental, just like he was, and just like that episode was. There's a reason it ended season 3. But I am in no hurry to watch it again
no, no, no.
because it made me
I,
never want to give another penny to Vince McMahon or the WWE for any reason. And I was already kind of on that slope anyway. But I mean, I disliked WWE because they for what they've done to professional wrestling, but this is like a hatred because I feel like Vince McMahon's negligence literally killed one of the kindest and most talented human beings in the history of the business. So
Yeah, and we'll get into all that. I can't wait to get into all of that because yeah, because for years all we've heard it was from the WWE side,
it
and
makes me sick just talking about
do what?
it. It makes me sick just talking about it.
Yeah, I know. It's just ugh. It brings bad vibes to me right now, which is why I support AEW.
A shameless plug.
Yeah,
Well,
for
man, we've been at this for about an hour and a half. So,
right.
that being said, let everybody know what you got going on Stovall Wrestling Network.
Yeah, man. We're still doing it. We're still talking about wrestling. If you just want to have some fun talking about wrestling, not really, dissecting things or anything like that, but just having fun, being fans, talking about it, and stuff like that, then please join me on the SWN, the Stovall Wrestling Network, as part of TMB Studios. And I have a brand new podcast that is coming out, and it will be not on wrestling. Can you believe that, James?
He's gonna take a break. You're gonna tell me this man is gonna take a break from watching professional wrestling. That's how you know we're in the end times, folks.
Yes, that's basically it. But yes, I will be having another podcast, and it will be on the Power Rangers. You heard me right. The Mighty Morphin freaking Power Rangers. And not just the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but all the Power Rangers. Me and my co-host, the ace of everything, Mr. Quentin Ficklin. Yeah, I'm
Yep.
calling him the ace of everything.
Who and that's got a nice ring to it. And he's been on this program, and you
Mhm.
know the way his mind works is just amazing. And
Yeah,
and I'm actually gonna give him a bit of a shout out right now. You know, this program is part of Entertainment Evolved. And what that is it's a promotional network where we promote different things. This show is part of it. We have another show called Know You Are that's part of it that talks about like politics and current events and things like that. And then also another part of that is Superhero Homies, which the host of Superhero Homies is none other than, as Caleb just said, the ace of everything, Quentin Ficklin, or Superhero Homie Q. Check that out, man. That guy is just a wealth of knowledge. I mean, I was in an argument the other day about DC Comics. We're talking about something about Batman, and I was like, don't make me call Ace. I'll call him right now. And
yeah.
they were like, no, 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 I believe you. They backed off. I mean, they just know. I mean, the guy is a treasure trove. So him and his co-host Kevin are both. I mean, they just have such a. If you like superhero stuff, Marvel, DC, any of that, check that show out, man. They number one, they have like like 200 hours of content
Yeah.
that you can check out. But I mean, it's all top notch, really well produced, really well done. So
Yeah, I've checked out that show before. It's a really good podcast. I like that, especially if you want to find like a superhero type podcast to check out. And that's why I chose him for the Power Rangers podcast that we are launching, and I believe it's going to be called Go Go Power Rangers podcast. We were originally going to call it Angel Grove Radio,
oh
but
man, I like that though. But yeah,
I would have done that. However, we did the research, like when we tried to upload it or something like that, and it showed that, oh yeah, this one's already taken, so we had to change it. But I believe that's what it's going to be called. But that's why I picked him for this podcast, because he is a huge Power Rangers fan, just like I am. So it's going to be great. I can't wait to dive into that, and it'll be happy subjects too.
yeah,
It'll be
yeah.
awesome subjects. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So I've got a few things going on. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, we're very busy, uh, and you know I love doing this podcast, man.
Mhm.
It's probably one of the highlights of my week. But the subject matter is just it's fucking dark. Um, but yeah, if you stuck around with us this long, everybody, thank you. Caleb, thank you for joining me each and every week right here.
No
And
problem.
you know, check him out on SWN. Check out the Power Rangers podcast when it comes out, and check out Entertainment Evolved. And this has been an Evolved review.